And today I'm going to be talking about why I think the current party system, called the sixth party system, is coming to a close with this presidential election in a matter of 4 days, is it? Saturday? Yep, for 3 days, including today, 4. Now, I know this is crazy, but seismic shifts in the electorate have been taking since 2008, which means big things because when coalitions, political party coalitions, which I will be talking about, when political party coalitions change, it means that the party system changes. As an example, the fifth party system, best known as the New Deal coalition, hence there's a coalition. It was an alliance of Southerners, as you can see here, basically like south of the Mason-Dixie line, and Northern Union liberals, especially in the Northeast and the Midwest, like Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, who created an alliance essentially and said, you know what, we're going to work together to get Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, the welfare state done, lead the nation during World War II. And during this time, there was only one GOP president, Eisenhower. Now that's noticeable. Except for Richard Nixon, so I guess this should be 68. But until 68, basically, for 30 years plus, like 36 years, there was one GOP president. Granted, half of that time, 16 years, well, 15, there was one president, FDR, but still, that's noticeable that a coalition like that elected only one person in the opposite party. And that guy, Eisenhower, he was a center person, kind of like an Obama, but for the Republicans, because it was an absolute dominance by center-left and left-wing people on the economic side. Socially, though, that was way more mixed. That's when the political coalition fell apart, with the 1968 Civil Rights Act. 1964 Civil Rights Act caused it to collapse, because the Northern liberals said, hey, you know, we gotta do something about this massive... my apologies, that is my dog. You know, we gotta do this... something about this, like, massive racism in the country and all these disenfranchisement in your area of the country, the South. So let's do something. And so that caused the 1964 Civil Rights Act. And after that, guess what happened? Richard Nixon became president because he was able to capitalize on the fracturing of the New Deal coalition, which then brought about the sixth party system, the current one we're in, and my least favorite of all American political party systems, which is kind of sad because America is 260 years old plus. So, its characteristics, close elections towards the end. So in the 2000s and 2010s, there was close presidential elections, relatively, compared to the massive 490% electoral college landslides that George H.W. Bush, Ronald Reagan, and Richard Nixon had during the beginning of the sixth party system. The GOP had to rely heavily on the South and the Midwest. As you can see here, dark red. These states never voted for a Democrat. And, you know, you can see South Carolina never voted Democrat. Like, North Carolina to, like, basically, like, Virginia to Montana was basically what allowed them to win these massive majorities, because they had this coalition. And Texas is an amazing example, and I'm going to get into Texas, of rural, non-educated college people with wealthy, college-educated suburbanites. Okay, that's good. And the reason behind this was that if you look at the 1980 presidential election, I look at this and I see the absolute collapse of it's the absolute collapse, the fully closing of the curtain of any, it's the closing of the curtain of the fifth party system. And the reason why is because this is why. This is the exact same thing. Reagan campaigned for increased defense spending, implementation of supply-side economics, that's the most important thing, and a balanced budget. His campaign was aired by Democratic dissatisfaction with that doesn't matter, a worsening economy at home, that matters. Carter attacked Reagan as a dangerous right-wing extremist, I agree, although to some extent, and warned that Reagan would cut Medicare and Social Security, which he did want to do, but he was stopped. So, basically, on the economic side, what prompted what the Republicans did was supply side economics, which, for the most part, basically contributed to these massive deficits and recessions and huge inequalities. But the only thing is, what kept this coalition, this alliance of basically completely diametrically opposed economic individuals. The suburbs were wealthy, they were college educated, they wanted these tax cuts. The poor, on the other hand, were in the rural areas. They were conservative, they were poor, the reason why their lives were moderate during this time was because of the fifth party system and the New Deal coalition and the welfare state that the Democrats had created. But that welfare state started to collapse under the weight of a globalizing world in the 70s. As you can see, the 70s is the time when the political system changed, especially with Jimmy Carter, because he couldn't grapple with, what the hell do? I can't do the normal New Deal coalition things, which, as you can see, led to the rise of this new coalition. The social side is what really bound these two together. Conservatism. This means Supreme Court justices. This means abortion, gay rights. These social issues bound these two groups together, and quite frankly, acted as a nice shiny object for the poor, uneducated rural people to keep on voting for these, quite frankly, wealthy suburban people to continue to destroy their economic conditions. That's basically the six-party system. The biggest bellwether state was Florida, and throughout all these systems, I'm going to talk about Texas as the major bellwether state to show the shifting of the coalitions. Now, we are entering the seventh party system. This is big. America has shifts party systems only 7 times, as you can see, in the history. So this is big for our generation because, let's face it, all you viewers are my demographic group, under 18, or at least 18. So, the biggest thing with this is the extremism of the GOP. That's the main reason why. The other thing is the changing demographics of the country. If you look at this map, 2014, there was only one majority state. There were only 3. New Mexico, Maryland, Hawaii. Hawaii was Pacific Islanders and Asians. New Mexico was Hispanic. Maryland was African Americans. Okay, now let's move into this. Texas, New Mexico, Arizona, Nevada, California, Alaska, Georgia, Maryland, and New Jersey. By 2040 will be majority minority. Georgia will be basically the new Democrats' Minnesota. You can see the six-party system where Minnesota never votes for a Republican. Well, guess what? That's Georgia now. Georgia is going to be very, very Democrat after this election. I honestly don't see a Republican winning Georgia for a long time unless it's like 2016 again. Really shitty Democratic nominee such as Hillary Clinton, aka moderate Democrat who's white, not what you should be doing, going against someone who people think are outside the political system, haha, so funny, but I don't think America's going to fall for that again. And you can see Mississippi, Louisiana, Oklahoma become competitive. South Carolina will become a Democratic state by then, or at least Democratic leaning. And you can see North Carolina and Florida doing the same. 2060 is probably the end of this party system because the majority of states, I can count them off for you. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. Nearly 20 states. 21, 22. Nearly half of the states in America will be minority white. That's big. Minority white, 22 states. That means a majority of the people and the majority of the population in these states will be Democratic voters. So, if you were to transplant these people, I honestly don't know. This is my current thing for the 2020 election, but I was just doing that. Go. If you were to transplant the 2016 demographic groups, this is how the election would play out. Like, this is significant, people. This constitutes a massive change in politics for America. Look at this. You would never see this map under any circumstances in America. Never. You would never see this map. This is if you were to transplant like a future election. So this is what the new Democratic coalition is geographically. The East and West Coasts, biggest states being New York and California, in an alliance with southern states, biggest states as Georgia, Florida, North Carolina, and Texas. Throughout all of this, Texas is the bellwether state as to how the coalition moves, and I'll explain it. In 1932, FDR won Texas handedly. Quite frankly, 88%. Like, are you kidding me? That's like how Wyoming votes, even greater. That's insane. So you can see basically everywhere. So I need to fast forward very much in time because this is just too landslide-ish to do. Now this is good. John F. Kennedy and Richard Nixon. You can see how the people voted. These two counties right here are suburbs, as is this one. This is a very important county. It's called Harris County. It's where Houston is. These are Tarrant and Dallas, where, guess what, Dallas, Fort Worth are. You can see how the rural areas are Democrat and how the suburban areas are Republican. And then you also have the rural areas, and then along with the Northeast, that's what made the coalitions. But the only thing is that by 1972, look who's winning. Richard Nixon. He's winning the rural areas and suburban areas. That's what the sixth party coalition was. And if you keep on going, every single time a Republican won it every single time. And it basically was the bellwether of each of the states. The only reason why he won was because of Ross Perot splitting the votes. See Bob Dole winning then, George W. Bush winning then, and you can see these little tiny pockets. That's an urban area, urban areas, and you can see these Latino areas. And then you go to 2008, same thing again, except this is when the sixth party coalition, the Republicans Reagan coalition, begins to fracture. Look at this. Dallas County, Democrat. Harris County, Democrat. Austin, Democrat. San Antonio, Democrat. That's big. These are urban areas that go Democrat, and then with the Latino areas and the Latino and urban areas, it makes Texas 12 points rather than like the 88% that everyone else was getting for Republicans. Again, this was a low turnout year for Democrats, so it was pretty shitty. But this is now 2016. Despite Donald Trump winning the presidential election with 300 electoral votes, roughly, and him doing pretty well nationwide, look at this. All of those a Democrat hasn't won these two counties in decades. None in living memory, possibly, for our parents and our generation. And you see that little suburban area went Democrat, as are all these counties. So now you can begin to see the true fracturing, the collapse, the breakdown due to Donald Trump accelerating the six-party system's collapse due to Republican extremism. Guess what? You have now a new alliance. Suburbs and urban areas. And now in 2020, Joe Biden has a very real chance at winning Texas solely due to this new coalition of the suburbs and the urban areas. That's pretty important. Now, Florida and Texas will be the bellwether states as to whether a presidential candidate will win, especially Texas, considering that Texas will soon be one of the most populous states in the nation by like 2040. So Texas will basically be like New York was in the 1948 presidential election. If you go to 1948 presidential election, you can see that New York was the most populous state at 43 electoral votes. And if you look at the results, close states, New York was one of the closest, along with California, Ohio, and Illinois, all very populous states that both parties needed. You see the Republican won, well, he was the governor there, so he's kind of an exception. But you can see how New York was like the swing state in 1948. That's going to be Texas. Texas, for the next several elections, will be the swing state that every single candidate needs to win. Because think about it. If you look at the, if I go to yet another political map simulator, go to the presidency, look at these three states. These are the states everyone keeps on talking about. Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania. Oh my goodness. These are the states that Hillary Clinton lost and that Joe Biden needs back. You do realize that Texas is basically the same size as them. One state is equivalent to 3 states. And it gets even worse because Texas is going to gain 23 3 congressional districts, the highest out of any state. And it'll be even more pronounced in this election. Look at that. Especially when you're considering this was the traditional stronghold of the Democrats. These 5 states, these gave Obama his wins. Well, guess what? These are the new Democrat states, and they're 116 electoral votes. So you'll see a future presidential election in our lifetime where Republican is winning those states. Fret not, because the Democrat will win these. These is the new base of the Democratic coalition. And if you want to get really technical, here we go. Realignments, groups, 2006 to 2018. You can see how white college-educated people were already pretty leaning Democrat. They moved that way to 2018, and then they're going to move to 2030, really. Black people, they can only go more Democratic. White women, they have moved significantly more Democratic. But people over 65, their population is going to go up it's gone up and it's reached its peak right now. This is the peak of 65 and older. This is the last election. Well, 2016 was, but 2016 is the last election where old Southerners, uneducated, white people decide the election, aka Republicans winning in the 6-party system. 7th party system will be young, young, minorities, college-educated, and urban-suburban alliance that allows Democrats to effectively make America a one-party state like they did in the 5th party system, except for some small pockets of America, like basically everywhere that is unpopulated. Because think about it. All of those states have like 4 electoral votes, like each, come on. Those states are nothing compared to Texas's whopping 41 in the next election. If you look at geography, this is pretty much the biggest thing of the realignments. City has only moved more Democratic, duh. Rural areas, it is, I don't even know how to describe it. 2016, Minnesota had their congressional election. Obviously, they had it. If you look at the House of Representatives results, you can see this is probably the best state out of anything. You can see how rural areas controlled by the Democrats, urban areas are controlled by the Democrats, and rural areas are controlled by the Democrats as well. The Michigan 5th, 7th, and 1st congressional districts. However, sorry that I was asking for some help with AP Enviro. Sorry, don't look at that. But now you see the flip. Rural and rural and rural, Democrat. And this seat is going to flip to the Republicans in this election cycle. And this seat will flip back to the Democrats because that's a suburban, rural kind of area. It's kind of like New York 18th and 22nd. Suggest you check them out. Pretty interesting. So these two districts flipped to the Democrats because they're suburban, college educated, newly racial minorities, and new millennial, Generation X, Generation Z, Zoomer millennial, wealthy minorities, college educated suburbs that are going to the Democrats. That's good. For the Democrats, at least. For Republicans, this spells disaster. They are a white political party in an increasingly non-white nation that is college educated. That's why they don't vote for education bills. That's why they want to stop immigration. This is the reason why. Because they know that when people become college educated and areas become racially diverse, they lose. Look at Texas. Its college education rate is like 40%, 38%. Its white population is 48%. That means Democratic voters are majority in Texas. That means all they need to do is get out and vote, and that's what's probably going to happen this time around. Now, if you look at the region map, this is the region, Southwest, Midwest, Rust Belt, etc., etc., etc. Regions, Midwest, Rust Belt, going significantly to the Republicans. South Coast Texas, that will be the new part of the alliance. It's a two-part alliance. California and the Cascadia, Northeast and Southwest Texas, and South Coast Texas. That alliance, that four-part alliance, is going to give the Democrats every single winning majority. Senate, though, that'll be a little difficult, because if you go to the Senate, now this is long-term stuff I'm talking about. None of this that I'm talking about is going to occur for the future. If you go to the Senate, let's just say every single Democrat wins. So Alaska, yada, yada, yada. Okay. So you can see, this is a pretty good alliance. It's working out pretty good for the Democrats. But, they only get to 50 votes. Oh, there's Illinois. So they get to 52. They have a narrow majority. But that doesn't mean that the Republicans are always going to win in those seats. Because remember, these are Democratic-leaning states, while everything else will be solidly Republican. Although Pennsylvania will still be a competitive state solely due to Pittsburgh, especially Philadelphia. Pennsylvania, as you can see with my map, it leans barely Republican. Like, Pennsylvania will also be the bellwether state. So, this new coalition, and as you can see, Mississippi becoming Democrats, so I'll even add that in there. I'll do this. See? So Democrats will have slight majorities in the Senate, massive majorities in the House, because these are really populated areas. 38 electoral votes, 55 electoral votes, 29 electoral votes, 29, 15. Those are big states, big populated states. And they're going to be winning in the House a lot with these states. The only thing is that the Senate's going to be competitive. The Electoral College will probably be dissolved by like 2030 due to the National Popular Vote Interstate Compact, which I'll do a little thing on later, probably on my Snapchat account. And finally, this is probably the most important thing. This stuff will not happen until 2030 to 2035. So all the stuff I'm talking about, we won't see until we're probably in our 30s, starting to gray, have children, saving for retirement, having responsibilities and life. That's not good, but it does mean good things for the country in long term. It means that we will be able to have liberal people controlling the nation in the long term, creating what I like to say, what the fifth party system could have been economically, and what the sixth party system could have been socially. Making America a true liberal democracy across the world that everyone should model. And I usually don't say that because I know that America is not the greatest country in the world. However, this is the next party system that we will be entering in. The seventh party system, starting with this election, and it will control pretty much for our entire adult lives until we're in our 50s. Now, thank you all so much for watching. I hope you guys all have a great day, and I'll see you all again soon.